We have two quick questions here, one from Janko and one from Dean about the euro pound, with Janko asking about the euro pound's risk sensitivity, saying sometimes the pair moves against risk flows and other times it moves in line with risk flows. Sometimes it moves against the dollar, sometimes it moves with the dollar. So just want some clarity on that. And Dean asking about the correlation that the euro pound sometimes has on the pound versus the US dollar. So thanks for the questions, guys. We can tackle each of them in order. So firstly, from a risk point of view, the pound is seen as a much more volatile mover compared to something like the euro. And recently, as an example, it has been resembling moves in terms of its volatility structure, much like an emerging market currency, moving in line with risk flows, as more as a high beta, so to speak. In the euro, with its low interest rate, have been known as a carry against higher yielding currencies like the Mexican peso or the ruble or the ZAR, as an example. So in that sense, sometimes the euro can exhibit safe haven like moves due to that carry trade functionality, and the pound sometimes can exhibit high beta moves due to that risk sensitivity, due to that beta, which means sometimes the euro pound moves higher on risk off flows as the euro is set to gain and the pound is set to dump, and moves lower on risk on flows whenever we see equity markets rise, etc. However, this correlation is, like many others, far from perfect, and it's good to keep that in the back of your mind. But it's not something that would necessarily, be the only or the trigger to trade something like the euro pound, for example. Now, there are some other useful uses for the pair as well. Due to its composition, we have the euro on the one end, which is the second most traded currency pair in the world. And on the other hand, we have the pound, which is the fourth most traded currency in the world. So there's a lot of liquidity in the euro pound pair. And it's normally a very slow mover, I'll say normally, in terms of its average daily range, because there's lots of buying and selling going on, lots of liquidity in these two currencies. And when there are strong moves to the upside or to the downside in the euro pound, we can usually expect an inverse reaction in something like the pound versus the US dollar. So if we just take a look at this chart, on this chart we have the euro pound in gold, and we have overlaid on top of that the pound versus the US dollar in blue. And if we just zoom out, we can see signs of that inverse correlation between these two. Now, again, just like with the risk sensitivity, like any other correlation, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to work out all the time. But you will be surprised how often excessive moves in something like the euro pound can have a very drastic impact in something like the pound versus the US dollar. So one way to use this as a gauge is to keep track of any major fundamental shifts in the euro pound, as any big moves in this pair should have meaningful reactions in something like the pound US dollar. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you abandon all your regular macro analysis and only look for opposite moves in these two. Whenever the euro pound moves up, look to sell the pound dollar, for example. You're not going to do that. That'll drive you crazy and it will cost you a lot of money. It only means it's a very good thing to know. It's very good knowledge to have about this pair, what type of possibility, what type of cross flows there can be between something like the euro pound as well as the pound US dollar, especially if you're planning to trade either one of them. Strong flows in the pound dollar can also affect the euro pound as a result. So it's always best to still stick with your normal macro analysis, but a very handy correlation to keep in the back of your mind whenever you're looking to trade either one of these two. So guys, I hope that answers the questions. Any other ones, please don't hesitate to let us know.